My name is George Hernandez. Since I was a kid, I remember the Playhouse, and I attended many plays there. Most recently, I became involved with the Playhouse because I was asked to join a team to bring theater back to this vibrant location in Coconut Grove.
My name is Michael Spring. I'm Senior Advisor to Mayor Carlos Jimenez for the county and Director of the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs. The Playhouse has been closed since 2006, at the end of its 50th season as a result of a crushing amount of accumulated debt. Our Department of Cultural Affairs has been involved with the Playhouse for years and years, from a sense of attempting to find a way to resuscitate the theater, to bring it back to life.
My name is Brian Schreiner. I'm the Dean of the College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts at Florida International University. As a state institution, the university had an opportunity for the county and the university to establish a partnership along with Gable Stage to reestablish the Coconut Grove Playhouse as a major regional theater company.
My name is Joseph Adler, and I'm producing artistic director at Gable Stage at the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. A regional theater is a theater that presents, in our case, at least 6 productions a year that originate right here in Miami for our audience specifically. We're elated about the relationship we have with FIU and their theater department. There are many examples around the country of that kind of symbiotic relationship between a regional theater and a fine theater department. And there's so many things that we can do together.
We have 3 goals for this project. The first goal is to do a thoughtful and thorough look at the historic nature of the property. The second goal is to create a 300-seat regional theater that's managed by Gable Stage, so that the Playhouse can be a hub for great theater that nurtures Miami artists. And the third goal was to stay on budget. And so we have to accomplish this thoughtful look at history and this drive to create a wonderful 300-seat theater for the 21st century within our budget.
In the years prior to it being shuttered, it was not very well treated. It wasn't well stewarded as a site or a building. It had a kind of boom and bust cycle of patterns that took a toll on the building itself. Things were pretty much left just as they were on the last day. It really needs an infusion of capital and help to bring it back to another chapter of glory. We are restoring entirely the front building. It will look as it did in 1927. The next space, this crescent-shaped lobby, it's going to become a garden. It will be beautifully planted. It'll be a place of social communion. And then you'll walk into the auditorium, but not without passing through its beautiful new facade. And that passage of the body along that sequence through that axis will mirror the way people have moved in this site since Kino did his work.
My name is Joe Mobilia. I'm an associate principal with Fisher Dax Associates Theater Consulting. The renovation projects are a little bit different from the new ones in that, obviously you're dealing with an existing space, but since they were originally built, there are many things that are that have to be different from, audience comfort, seating and sight lines, mechanical systems, equipment. So it really is looking at the facility, bringing it up to, to current standards while, preserving the character of the building.
I like to think of the Playhouse history as being part of 4 chapters. The first chapter of that history is when it first opened, and it was a silent screen movie house designed by Keenel and Elliott, a great architect of the boom years of Florida architecture. The architecture was very celebratory and diffusive, and there was a desire for the exotic. So the building's most powerful architectural elements come from this period. And I think the building has a significance because it belongs to his hand and because it's such a stellar example of this period. There was then a subsequent period, the period of Engel and Parker, where we had gone through the Depression, we'd gone through the war, there was a jubilant nature in the mood of the country. We were looking forward to a new world. It was the modern era. And we see Alfred Browning Parker, who came to be a master of that era, of the modern era, the mid-century, start to work. But here he had to work in an existing context. He was doing a remodeling from within. And the voice that he layered his work upon was antithetical to his own voice. He probably understood, but chose not to pursue classical ornamentation, classical detailing, classical proportions. He shunned all of that, as the great masters did. And so what we have is a collision of two eras in one place.
One of the biggest challenges on renovation projects, and very common, is the height of the room. The Playhouse's original design was seating on a single level. Later in its history, a balcony was added, but the balcony was added within a room that was not meant to have a balcony. So in that sense, everything is very compressed in terms of seating rake and sight lines, etc.
He compressed the volume of the great auditorium, Kienl's auditorium, first by a third to make a great big lounge area, and then by another third with a projecting mezzanine that he built. So the great volume of the room was compressed down almost to a third when you add the mezzanine. We're entering now the auditorium which Parker created by compressing the Kienl Hall by a third of its length. So the movie house was never this short. And this wall here is by Parker. You see the mezzanine that he added later here is also by Parker. This went all the way up for 2 stories in the original Kienl. And then here you see the arch, one of the arches of Kienl's auditorium, and how it's been jeopardized by the structure of the mezzanine and consumed by this metal grate wall rather indiscriminately here.
Another real difference between contemporary theaters and the early days of the Playhouse are lighting positions. Especially for a regional theater, you need very good catwalk lighting positions. So there's a whole zone above the audience that is necessary for those technical and lighting accommodations. And hand in hand with that are acoustical issues as well. I mean, this is meant to be a space. The Playhouse wants to be a space for speech, for intelligibility, and you need height for that as well.
We're now walking through what Parker created out of the back half, the back third of the auditorium. You have to realize that the seats of the auditorium came all the way here. It was voluminous. There was no ceiling here. The auditorium had a double height space here, and at this point, Parker creates this ceiling and created this lounge for drinks and so on. So that wall was never there during Kienl's time. This was done because Engels wanted to make money. He was a businessman, and he saw it as dinner theater. So he boarded off the openings of the theater to the sidewalk. It had beautiful shops and such, enlivening the sidewalk, creating urban life. He blocked them off. So you came into one door, and in a sense you were trapped, very close to the cashiers, and hungry and thirsty. So he had to change what Kienl had done, and in fact he changed it dramatically. But there are some elements there still, and they are to be reused and repurposed. And they are, to list them, these paired columns that are called Solomonic columns, but they were relegated to bathroom locations. The ones in the Great Theater are gone, not by Parker's hand, but a subsequent hand. We're in the men's room here, and these are the Solomonic columns that originally existed in Kienl's auditorium. So even back here, we would have still been in the main auditorium of Kienl's hand. Parker did not expose this column next to a urinal like that. He had, softened it away, drywalled it away. But afterwards, when this bathroom was enlarged, when it became double the length, they exposed these columns, which is kind of an impropriety, let's say, to the language of classical architecture. And you can see how the profile of these arches are different. So even Kienl's arches were reconfigured by those hands that worked after Parker, ripping out Parker's work and changing Parker and Kienl at the same time. In this case, the columns are, the partitions, the toilet partitions are attached to the columns. There are a series of fountains that are there and concrete screens that are there that were vents. But the floor was raised 3 feet up to create a better pitch to view the stage. Because of course, when you're in a movie house, you're looking up at the great screen, and it wasn't like the screens of today, it was one enormous screen. And at a play, you want to see the person's face. You need to see the gestures of the face. Because Parker raised this floor up 3 feet, you can see how this fountain, which was original to Kienel, is sunken into the 3 foot of concrete that was poured here to correct the angle of the floor from a movie house to a live theater. I'm up on stage now. If you look here, you see the proscenium arch. And the arch has 2 layers. This is the first one, and this is the second one. The second one being more robust. But the shapes are different because it's a form. It was a cast. So if you listen, I'm going to hit 3 of these different decorative rondelles, okay? That's one. There's another. It's like a marimba, right? It's hollow behind. So this mold would be ordered by running lengths. They would prop it and fill it with mortar. So this is one of those details of the original that we can remove and reappropriate into the new construction of the theater to interpret Kienel's time. Parker changed in a way the very essence of the body of the room. And he had to cut and slice and dice whatever details he needed to make this happen. I think it was, by and large, the work in the theater from him, of his hand, was by and large a work of expedience. Where we see more of his detailing is in the lounge area and in the bar and restaurant, which were put into the front section of the building, the section that was once open to the sidewalk. But sadly now those have been removed by subsequent hands. And that subsequent hand is the beginning of that 3rd chapter, at which time it became affiliated with universities and with the state itself. So we are in a space that was originally part of a crescent-shaped lobby during Kienel's time in the 20s. Parker then used this space and put the elevator hoistway, stairs, this small foyer, and some dining rooms. This ceiling, which may look like it might be Kienel's, is not, and it's also not Parker's. This ceiling was put in the 80s. So this gridded ceiling here that covers the entire room is not from the period of significance. Here, we're just in front of the main entry doors. This was the principal entry in the 1927 movie house, and then also in the 1956 live theater venue. Parker did put the travertine on the walls and put these ticket booths, but this ceiling is not of Kienel's hand and it's not of Parker's hand. These soffits match the detailing in the next space from the 80s. The vault was changed, and so it's not from the period of significance. During the period of nonprofit theater, Parker's voice was removed, the majority of Parker's voice. In fact, there's a little more of Kienel's voice that remains than Parker's. And of Kienel's, we are documenting we're going to reappropriate those pieces. After that period of nonprofit theater, it finally closed. So the 4th and final stage are these 10 years where it's been dormant.
One of the big challenges for the Coconut Grove Playhouse in designing a 300-seat theater that has all the bells and whistles of a 21st century theater, and you're doing it by integrating some of the historic elements, the old theaters, how do you do that in the most thoughtful, respectful way possible? And I'm really proud to say we've hired an amazing team of professionals whose job it is to do that.
From an audience perspective, the state of the art is just the entire audience experience, starting with entering the lobby, having sufficient bathrooms, getting to your seat in a good way. And once you're there, you have to have good sight lines to the stage. You have to be able to hear what's going on. A sense of intimacy is very important. And so that's something that we're focusing on in particular.
One of the most exciting things about our theater at the Biltmore is the intimacy. That's so important to us that when we move to this new theater, we have to maintain that level of intimacy.
300 seats, 350, something in that range, is really the sweet spot for the type of program that a regional theater would do, that Gable Stage would do. So, with the Playhouse, we've really hit that sweet spot. And if you were to somehow pick up a production in a 300-seat theater and do it in a 700-seat theater, 1,000-seat theater. It could be exactly the same production, but the experience for the audience would be very different. And really the experience for the actor would be different as well.
If you've gone to the more intimate houses, the 300 and 400-seat houses, then you know the experience is totally different. You feel as if you're in the room with the actors.
We're doing something now that really clears the slate, if you will, to make it the best type of theater it can be for this current time.
By partnering with a regional theater company like Gable Stage, it enables us to offer the first Masters of Fine Arts in theater, which would be Miami's first MFA, that we would not otherwise be able to do so. We provide our faculty and our students with professional development opportunities in acting, directing, playwriting, production.
When we open our new theater here in Coconut Grove, I predict there will be so many actors who will stay and so many more who will decide to move here. Not just actors, designers, directors, playwrights.
Architectonica has a reputation for being sort of cutting edge, 21st century, lots of technology. And George just has this deep appreciation for history and historic buildings. And in some incredible way, these two sensibilities have merged.
We've talked about the loss of integrity of the auditorium building and the quandary of what happens when a work of a master, Keenel, is altered by necessity by another master whose work then gets torn out by bad stewardship over time. We are measuring and saving all of the pieces that remain to reappropriate them without engaging in faux history or mimicry. It's a very delicate balancing act. You have to be very sensitive of keeping and saving what you can and allowing the building to have yet another chapter, because people come to historic sites to have a significant exchange or an experience with the past. The place should also have a future, but it should be something that has integrity, that has sincerity, that you're not creating a falsehood that may have once been there that isn't anymore. I think that's what this community feels for in terms of this site. They want that history to remain living and vibrant, and they want it to have a future. Something very special happened here, and we're going to bring it back.